So, our topic for today is futuristic or fundamental. Is planning for AI simply planning for the future? We know that AI has been a really topical piece over 2023, perhaps the most spoken about theme as it relates to workplace behaviour and productivity. So we felt it would be a nice idea to round out the conversation towards the back end of 2023 by broaching that topic with you all today. We're particularly excited to explore this topic today because we've got some fantastic data through some recent research we've conducted with one of our partners, i4CP. So we're really looking forward to sharing some of that with you throughout our conversation today. A fair bit of diversity in our room today. It's obviously reflective of the organisations we work in and society at large, whether we're early adopters or innovators or late adopters. I'm not going to use the term laggards because that feels like it carries a bit of connotation there. But we know that we all carry different tendencies as it relates to our uptake of technology. So the challenge for organisations becomes, how do we discern the technology that really matters for performance and for productivity? And how do we bring along diverse groups of people so that we're truly harnessing the power of technology such as AI to unlock competitive advantage? So that's going to be the crux of our conversation today, and to steer us through that conversation, I'd like to welcome to the stage our Managing Director at Springpoint, Dylan Flavell, who will take us through the conversation. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning. A round of applause, which is a terrific way to start. I just echo firstly Chris's sentiments. It's terrific to see you all. We run these events regularly, but we have missed a couple in the last couple of months or couple of quarters really, and really great to be back here with people in the room. As Chris said, Dylan Flavell, I'm the Managing Director here. Really fascinating topic. We're going to get into it soon. We're going to run today a little bit differently to how we've run some of our other similar events. Our feedback is very regularly, can I do a little bit less talking, or others that are up here, but often it's me, and can we make sure that we connect and share experiences from around the room? So we're going to make sure we do that. But to Chris's point, our goal is always to give you a bit of content, a bit of research. I'm really pleased Chris mentioned our new partnership with i4CP, Institute for Corporate Productivity, really fascinating organisation who do a lot of research. We're going to share some of that content today, but you'll see on your chairs, you've got a QR code, and if you scan that now or post today, you'll see all the content plus a bunch of other stuff that we've got from both our own research and our partnered research with i4CP that you can really dig into. So we give you enough to get you thinking today, and also get you connecting and sharing experiences of what's happening, because we know that networking component is really important in terms of hearing what others are doing. So if an alarm goes off and you have to leave the room really quickly, the summary of what I'm going to talk about is this. Essentially, it's happening, and it's happening fast. So this whole idea of generative AI, we'll talk a bit about what happened a year ago and how that really accelerated what's happening, but it's happening now. And what we're seeing through our research, and no doubt even just the representation of people in the room, is a good probably span of looking at adoption rates of technology, is we're seeing some organisations take up this technology and think about its impact and start to yield massive dividends from that. We're seeing some who aren't, and we're seeing some who are somewhere in between, of course. But the power of this technology as a part of the organisational experience and the benefit it can bring organisations is so great. But the speed of its uptake and deployment by some also represents a big risk to organisations and to people as well. So a key tenet of this morning is we need to start thinking about it. It's only been a short period of time that it's become popularised. It's not the first time that generative AI has been a thing. It's been around for many years, but there's a real opportunity and a void, I would say, of leadership in thinking about what we're going to do about this, how we yield the most value and benefit, but also how we manage the potential harm to organisations and individuals. So we'll talk a bit more about that, and the research, I hope, will show a little bit about that as well. So if we want to wind back a year, and it was interesting that we're nearly a year to the day, actually. So 30th of November last year, it's hard to believe that that was when ChatGPT was launched. And within 5 days, it had 1 million users. And within 5 months, it had 100 million users. So it's been the fastest growing software application in history. And I think their website now, perhaps not just users, but their website commands about 1.5 billion hits a month. So the massive scale and speed of reach is fascinating. I guess the interesting thing about ChatGPT, though, is really captured in this quote up here. We've got a little mark in the wrong spot, but it's a fascinating reflection from this particular fellow, Greg Suttel, who studies marketing and looks at disruptive technology and uptake of disruptive technology. But his quote there is that technology is only able to gain traction when it acquires a simple and elegant interface, because that's what plucks a technology from the hands of geeks and deposits it with the entrepreneurs. So if you want to know what will take off, don't look at the technology, look at the interface. And I guess that's sort of what happened in the last year. And I mean, a similar metaphor or perhaps point in time, if you look back 10, 20 years ago, was when computing, all of a sudden, we got a monitor. So in fact, I was in London, I don't know, about 2 months ago with my kids, and we're in the Natural History Museum, and we're walking around looking at the first computer, really, and it was probably the width of this room, and it was just it was a big piece of machinery. So all of a sudden, wind forward, all of a sudden we've got an interface. Then we have smartphone devices. Then we have apps, which were just the capacity for people to engage really quickly and simply, which essentially has enabled us to popularize something which, many of the technologists will say, this is not new. ChatGPT is not new. It's been happening for a while. Prediction science has been going on for a while, and it's absolutely true. I remember going to the States myself about 15 years ago, and where's Fiona Wynne? Fee, I remember when I was in the States, and Fee was our very, very first employee. And I remember when I was in the States listening to a particular fellow talk who was very, very big on prediction science, but particularly in the people field. And his name's Al Adamson, and we've had him here before, and he's quite well known in the sort of land of people and technology. And we were like, oh, this is going to be the next big thing. And it sort of never was. I mean, yes, analytics is a thing, particularly in the people space, but it has never quite got the traction that we thought it would. But I think this is a really interesting point in time now, clearly, where it's free, people can use it, they're seeing massive benefit from it, and it's all of a sudden connected the masses with the opportunity that this presents. So, fascinating point in time. So what I want to do is just share some examples of how generative AI is being used in organisations, and you'll have many more examples. Some perhaps better, some different. And so I've just got 2 or 3 examples to share with you, and then we're going to get you to have a bit of a chat about the things that you're seeing, and so that you can just start to get an idea of the potential applications of generative AI if you haven't seen some of that before. So the first one is Thomson Reuters up there, and it's really an example of, I think, where a lot of the obvious thinking about generative AI in many organisations is that it's about productivity. What can we do to improve productivity through generative AI? So this is an example of organisations who have essentially deploying internal instances or their own version of ChatGPT in their organisation to great effect. So at Thomson Reuters, they've got a couple of things that they've developed. The first one is what they call Open Arena, which is their internal instance of AI that's essentially trained in internal data and gives direct answers to questions. So employers, similar to ChatGPT, will summarise information from the company's intranet policies and documents, for example. So it just provides a great interface on organisational content and context, and can answer questions related to anything that you want, and obviously summarise and draw references or induction from that. The second thing that they've also done, though, is they're an early adopter of Copilot, which is sort of like a ChatGPT, but it's Microsoft application that essentially is put over your own data, for example. So over your own emails, your own documents, all of your own files, so that you can ask questions of that. So example up there is a command. You might go, hey, can you summarize the chats, emails, and documents about X customer's escalation that happened last night? So you can just see, the first one knows the organisation, second one knows you and is personalised to you. And we've just seen in the past, 2 or 3 months, and there'll be many more people in this room who are more familiar with the different versions of similar things to Copilot that have been introduced, but sort of low cost, high ease and capacity to be able to introduce into your organisation to just really improve productivity. So big productivity play there. And of course, though, the thing we talk about, if we sit down and talk about people go, oh, what's getting in the way? Time gets in the way of us being able to innovate and create other value. So yes, a productivity play, but the step to be able to release that time is about being able to bring us to a level of innovation as well. So obviously more than just productivity itself. Second example, and I've just drawn this from a UK company. And essentially it's about, where similar, and I'll say simple AI, as in it's not necessarily anything that anyone in here hasn't got access to, is really impacting on or being built in to the customer experience. So you can see up here, Octopus Energy, essentially as an organisation, talking about the fact that they've been able to massively increase productivity, not reduce headcount. They've deployed all of the people through this into different roles. But you can see essentially what they're saying is they built ChatGPT into its customer service channels, and says that it's now responsible for handling 44% of customer inquiries. So the customer inquiries and the interface is at an email level, so being able to auto-generate emails and responses. But really strong data saying that emails written by AI delivered 80% customer satisfaction comfortably, better than the 65% achieved by skilled, trained people. So being built into core engagement channels within an organisation. And I'm sure some of you have seen and no doubt experienced that in different ways as well, as have I, to great frustration at times. The third one is a little less about particular instances, but with Amazon, some will be familiar with their story, which is obviously an incredible story over the last 20 years, really. But where they've actually built generative AI and more into the core value proposition, not just in how they work, but also their service offering and what they do and who they are. So the first one, fascinating that their largest visible play for Amazon is the homepage of their website, where it's tailored to their 300 million users, so they can accurately predict what they're most likely to buy. And I think we'll all know that we can see at times that things are following us around, and we know that that's happening. Amazon have even extended on that, such that they have a predictive mailing service. So they'll send people things well before they've even ordered them, and then you can send them back, of course. But they're predicting what consumers want. Voice controlled intelligence. Who in the house has got Alexa or something similar to that that's working overtime for them? Yeah. Yep. It's remarkable that my kids talk more to that than me. It's not remarkable, actually. It's just a thing. So that's something that clearly they've invested in. As you see there, in 2025, it's estimated that about 130 million Amazon Echoes will be sold globally. So a lot happening there. And then the third part of the Amazon story is really how AWS, the Amazon Web Services, essentially developed generative AI as a core service that they are selling, and are in many ways making it very easy for us as individuals and organisations to integrate this type of technology into our organisations and of course into our personal life as well. So really at the core of what they do. So 3 different examples there, and as I said, I'll get you to share a little bit in a moment about some of the things you're seeing or perhaps some of the opportunities that exist in your organisation. Before I do that though, some research in brief. So we've gathered a few different sources here, including some of the stuff that we've gathered as well. I know that will be a little bit small, but I'll call out a couple of things. So I guess the first thing up here is that, sort of saying 2 out of 3, that's the proportion of current jobs that are exposed to or will likely to have some form of automation replace them. So it's a significant part of our workforce if we look at workforce and the work that we do that has that opportunity for some level of AI automation. 25% is the average portion of those current roles that could be automated, because of course it's not everything. If you think of the things that we all do, there's a range of things. Some of our tasks are menial, some of them are higher level creativity and thinking, some of them require a lot of context and judgment. So the capacity to automate a job, of course, sometimes exists, but it's more likely component parts of jobs, which is both an opportunity but also a challenge in how we think about org design, cost in organisations, and we'll talk more about that later. And then this last one, it's just such a big number when you think about it. We've got plenty of people in here who run P&Ls, but if you think about 38% profitability impact on businesses, so if you think about that opportunity, it's massive. Now, that was a large study that looked across organisations. There'll be some organisations where that's greater and smaller. We know that different industry sectors are more propensity to have AI and generative AI be a role in them based on what they do. But in summary, it's a massive impact. And on the right-hand side, in some of our research, the question we're asking is, what are the outcomes that your organisation's experiencing from experimentation with or use of generative AI? So we know that the ways it can impact are broad and many. The obvious ones are up the top there. Time savings and increased productivity, and you can see that's certainly where things are going to start with, and that sort of makes sense. Just as a bit of an indication here, as I shared with our research partner, really strong focus on reporting data out that looks at what high-performance organisations are doing and what low-performance organisations are doing. And you can see here that high-performance organisations are more early adopters, and the way that high-performance organisations are characterised here are organisations that, from a performance perspective, which is around cost, customer, profitability, all of those types of things, have performed well over a long period of time. So it's essentially anchoring around that idea of performance, but saying organisations that are high performing, yep, they're using it to get time savings, increased productivity, cost savings, enhanced quality, reduced human error, real interaction between those two, they're a bit similar, reduced burnout, so obviously there's a double-edged sword to sort of, as we think about AI, but the capacity to lighten the load and increase productivity, but not through pushing people more. So there's something around wellness and health that sit in there as possibilities. And I think our last talking point was on this idea of being burnout, and we know it's still a thing in organisations. And of course, this potentially has the opportunity to help, but also the amount of change and disruption that this presents also has the opportunity to contribute to that as well. Ability to divert employees to new tasks. Too soon to tell. You can see our lower performing organisations are those that are thinking, and I think you saw that stat that was up there earlier about, which I'll share again in a moment, around the fact that there are a lot of organisations not yet in the space of thinking about it. Decreased dependency on consultants. I'm not sure that's something we want, of course. We should have omitted that data point. You're getting that thinking. Increased data security, privacy, security risk, those sorts of things. So it tails off. But you can see there are lots of ways it can impact. But I guess the most important thing is we go, well, what does that all mean? So through our research, what we're seeing is that 17%, that's the proportion of organisations currently using or experimenting with an internal instance of AI, or generative AI, and we know that this is readily available. Most organisations have either paid for it or have access to it, but only 17% have gone down the path of experimenting with what that will mean, and 40% of organisations are not ready to take advantage of or consider AI in any way. So it's an interesting point that we're at, something that's moving at massive pace, that we've got early adopters who stand to gain a lot, but also that means there are organisations who stand to lose a lot, and perhaps more so than any other disruptive change or technology, but disruptive change we've ever seen. That little quote, I really like that one. It's and I've used it before in this forum because it's true. In the new world, it's not the big fish that eats the small fish, it's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. So I think this is a central idea for today, is going, how do we start to take a more positive and proactive stance on what this is, what this could be. So I'm going to sort of take things down to the next layer again, or I guess where many people in the room have really deep backgrounds and expertise in thinking about the implications of business strategy and change on organisations. So we're sort of going to drop to that level and sort of start to talk about that a little bit. So little slide here just around generative AI, and interesting, I heard a couple of these things come out in the conversations I jumped around to. So what are the pros and cons? Of course there's many, but what's sitting between the sort of pros and cons here is really at the heart of how we manage this transition, how we integrate this technology in a way that yields great benefit but also manages some downside risks. So some pros in there: increased productivity, but a con there around required technical expertise, and you could take that in a number of ways around the technical expertise to use it well. But also I think one of the big risks around increased productivity is we had a couple of examples of talking in groups I jumped around to. We're talking about essentially automating tasks that were really the core or the staple for junior employees in many ways. So, and if you think about your career and background, and I think about mine, many of the things that build the requisite learning and capabilities and capacity to think and problem solve are the tasks that we're starting to automate. So you go, okay, what does that mean around where are we finding the work to build the capability of people in our organisations, and for our certainly young people coming through the organisation, because that does take out layers of important work in many ways that relate to, if you want to call it executive function, getting to the level where you really experience. Well, that's built on some foundations. Cost savings and cost of deployment, I certainly heard that one come out as well. We're going, hey, there's massive opportunity here, but we've got old infrastructure or infrastructure that's not just born yesterday. So the ability to integrate and replace is a real thing. Job creation versus job displacement, a very obvious one, obviously very popularised piece here, and you'll see many different views on whether this will displace many hundreds of millions of jobs, or whether it will find the opportunity for reskilling and redeployment, and we'll talk about that as we go along here. Improved decision making versus the impact of poor data. I heard that one come out a lot as well. We know that the data sets that generative AI is based on, like everything, are based on subjective human experience data that's been created that has inherent biases. And as I'm sharing with the group down the front here, if you want to put a search into ChatGPT about who are the greatest 15 leaders of all time, 12 of them will be men, and how they're defining great is not defined. So some clear and obvious and inherent issues that will have the opportunity over time with greater data sets to be minimised, but also the opposite's true, have the opportunity to be further biased and skewed over time with use of particular parts of our community, business community, and parts of the world as well. So significant opportunity and risk in that. Personalisation versus ethical concerns. I'm sure we can all sort of relate to that. There's I did in my more recent use of ChatGPT, I did notice there's some terms and conditions that come into effect on the 14th of December. Did anyone see that? I did, but did anyone read what they were? So I didn't either. So yeah, there's a lot of that happening. Enhanced safety and legal considerations as well. So there's lots of pros and cons. What I want to talk to is about, I guess, getting more specific on the implications. We could look at lots of domains around which this impact could be happening and could be felt at an organisational level, but we've chosen three that clearly are areas that we are close to in terms of our work, but we've got some really interesting research to just provoke you on a little bit. And what I would just flag is, I think you keep in mind the one you're more interested in, because after, in the next 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to get you to move around the room to the area that you're perhaps more interested in discussing, and we'll shift our groups up a little bit just around thinking about the implications. So yeah, the three are performance and productivity culture. So the culture we have to maximise adoption, change in organisations and effective use. Strategic workforce planning, so SWP, sorry for the acronym there, but strategic workforce planning and job process and organisational design. There's a lot in that. Those things are similar, and there's actually a lot of diversity in that in many ways as well. And then organisational and leadership capabilities. So the first thing up here, oh no, you should be able to see okay, is we've got up here our culture framework, and we've just done a little bit of work over the past few months to just highlight some of the things which are probably clearly important cultural attributes that organisations will need to have in place to be able to maximise their use of AI. It was interesting in one of the discussions we had just talking about the risk appetite that organisations have. You know, some very risk averse and others at the other end of the spectrum where they're going hard, perhaps without the governance and control mechanisms that they need. But a few of the things we'd point out here, and I think there's more that you could make a case for others in here. But first one, you know, collaborative and open communication. So leveraging generative AI requires collaboration and open communication across teams and departments. I'm working with we're at Springpoint working with an organisation at the moment who are absolutely a market disruptor. And they are small, but are hoping to very soon be, they've got a big growth trajectory, and they're certainly working on the forefront of the area and technology that they're working in. And they're quite open, at least with us, around talking about the fact that one of their big advantages is that they're not one of their big competitors, because they talk about the level of silos, protecting of data that happens in organisation that prevents collaboration. And they're saying we have the capacity to move much more quickly. So really interesting area that I think around how we look at cross-functional collaboration across value chains, how that happens or doesn't happen, and how that limits the ability to bring data sets together to look at the impact that might have on customers or on particular customer opportunities or, you know, organisational opportunities. Disciplined delivery in here, so area which is really around, you know, a couple of things in particular: ethical and responsible practices, and data-driven decision-making. So, you know, the first one, organisations need to foster a culture that emphasises transparency, accountability, and ethical decision-making. Of course, you know, organisations that have the ability to use data and have governance mechanisms and forums where they're able to bring that together well is really important. But yeah, of course, there are things that we will be able to do that we'll be needing to make decisions around whether we want to do them. So like to the point before, we have visibility of data about our customers. We might need to decide what we want to do about that. There'll be things we can do, but we might be asking ourselves the question, should we be doing that? And there'll also be potential impacts on our organisation. We know at a very simple level, and I guess it's one of the reasons I got into this field, is that work is important. It's important for people. And so the impact that this technology has from a displacement perspective is significant. So what do we want to be for in the way that we go about doing this? But certainly our ability to make decisions with data and to do that well is really important. Empowered people and sort of this learning and improvement. So the ability to embrace creativity and innovation. So having, you know, psychologically safe environments, but particularly having environments where experimentation is something that is actively encouraged, but also enabled through the relationships that happen and also the work practices that happen. So some of it are if you like, the soft practices of being able to bring people in and have them feel trust, a level of trust to be able to share ideas that they're seeing through their work. But some of it's the hard practices around how we experiment, how we learn from mistakes, and how we then we hardwire learning back into the way we're working in the future. So many organisations do that well, and many don't do that well at all. So really big cultural opportunity around how small experimentation can lead to learning in a safe but highly impactful environment. And then, you know, this big one just around changeability. So clearly generative AI technologies are happening quickly. And so the capacity for organisations, you know, that statistic up there before, you know, there's 40% of organisations who've got no plan and are just saying, no, we're not ready to do anything. And in the past, that perhaps wouldn't have been such a big thing. It's only been, you know, a few years since this sort of stuff's really been popularised and happening. But as we shared before, the capacity and the impact it has means that slow movers stand to lose a lot. And we've seen the decline in the lifespan of organisations over the past 20 or 30 years massively. Their ability for organisations to not just thrive, but to actually survive has shortened in terms of number of years, and this poses a real risk to that in a very significant way. So a few of the factors that are probably really important. I think this one, I was sort of reflecting on it last night, is sort of future focus clearly important, where we think about the ability to look at multiple scenarios over time. And there's a few clients in this room that I've worked with who actively do that through their strategic planning processes, but it becomes a real need to be able to get out of the day-to-day and realise what's happening and the pace at which that's going to come. So productivity and performance culture, our first area. So keep in mind if that's the one you want to talk about a little bit more. Next one, as I said, it's a big area. So strategic workforce planning and job process and org design. As I shared before, 2 out of 3 jobs will be have the significant proportion of them are likely to be impacted by generative AI quite quickly, and then at least a quarter of those jobs have the ability to be automated. So you think of that, the implications of that around, well, what does that mean we're doing? What does that mean for our cost profile? How do we then augment roles with technology? How do we then think about capacity management? All of those sorts of things are really big and important. This data here, again, there's a lot more detail in the digital show bag that we've shared with you, but it just gives an idea of the sort of things. And I think strategic workforce planning is something that's been spoken about a lot in the past 10, 20 years, and only in very few organisations and industries is it done well. So it's always been the sort of great white hope around thinking about our workforce more strategically, managing cost and risk in the future, but it's never really quite got to where it could. But now it feels like we've sort of upped the ante on that a lot, and this will become, I think, the thing that maybe catalyses the need for much more consideration, because it won't be about planning for 10 or 20 or 30 years. It'll be about planning for the next 2 or 3 years, and it becomes much more proximal that period of time. So you can see the sort of things up there. Again, it's showed as the sort of the actions that organisations are undertaking, and it's split across high-performance organisations and low-performance organisations. So, assessing capability gaps, identifying future required skills. So you can see that's certainly a thing that many organisations are really starting to think about. Matching talent to new work requirements. So how do we put our best people in the spaces that stand to gain the biggest opportunity or stand to present the biggest opportunity? Deconstructing jobs and identifying which tasks can be best performed by humans versus automation. So I guess that's the most obvious one that plays out in some of those. So that's that research that I shared before. How do we think about the augmentation of it? And even if you think about, how you might put, let's say, generative AI within a process, what's the process? If that's replacing a role, then what becomes the quality role? And then what have we communicated to organisations around the way we're doing that? So really interesting, that one. Identifying new sources of talent, applicants and workers. So what are the people that we'll need? And we've got a number of clients, I'm sure many of you are seeing this around thinking about what are the new roles that might be needed for you to capitalise on data and technology. Empowering our employees to identify and implement advanced work automation. So we think of that, how much are we giving our people the opportunity to use tools, whether it's something that's been licensed particularly to us or whether it's ChatGPT. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the recommendations, but what we are seeing in our research is that one of the practices that good organisations or high-performing organisations are doing, they're being clear about what's allowed, what's not, and why, and they're making, I guess, broadly that known, even if that's if there's still a work in progress. And clearly, there are some risks to not doing that. Where we've probably seen, many of you have probably seen this in various forms of media, where organisations have people using it and putting sensitive information into open source, generative AI applications, and so the implications of that are obviously significant. So, enhancing leadership to improve our response to work evolution. So, what are the leadership capabilities? And we'll talk about that in a moment to be able to capitalise on this. And I think this is an interesting one down here. So, identifying upskilling and reskilling pathways for talent whose work is being reinvented by automation. So you can see the call out there is that's the biggest discrepancy between high-performance organisations and low-performance organisations in terms of the propensity at which that's being thought about. And I guess the the big call out there is it takes time to upskill people. And if we're, I've certainly been involved in organisations, I'm sure you have in the past, where we've been thinking about that, and we think about this as being a 2, 3, 4 year process. And when you go, now hang on, this might be 12 to 18 months, you go, well, what's the capacity for us to effectively help people learn new skills and change behaviour at the rate that's required? This is something we've spoken about in the past. It's not a new theme at all, but the gradient or the speed at which this is happening is much more rapid than things we've seen in the past, which I guess is the point. So a lot of considerations in there, some of which organisations are actively thinking about, and some of which they're not. And so the last one, third area, is really around organisational leadership capability. So we've done a little bit of work here to sort of start the thinking for you, not just today, but over the last few months. We've been going, okay, what are the capabilities required at an organisational level, and what are the capabilities at a leadership level that are really important? Some of them you'll guess, and perhaps some of them are not so intuitive. But on the left-hand side here, sort of some of the organisational capabilities, we've sort of categorise them as sort of the hard or technical stuff, and on the left-hand side more the human type things. On the hard skills, there's technical literacy. So are we comfortable? And we know that in some organisations we're very, depending on the industry and the sector, people are very comfortable using technology. They understand what ChatGPT is. They understand how it works. They understand based on that what the limitations of it are, and then they understand how to use it and work with it. Of course, there are many that don't. So you go, okay, that's a capability or a knowledge set in and of itself. Second one, data literacy, the capacity to know what data is needed in an organisation, how to solve problems with sets of data, not necessarily needing to be an actuary or a statistician, but how to get the right data to help you answer questions. Because, as again, I'll flick around to a couple of groups, the quality of output you get from these types of technologies dependent on the questions you're able to ask it. And certainly you've got instances internally, you go, what data do we need to have in there to make sure that it's a whole data set? So also the ability to look at data and go, nah, that doesn't feel right. We really need that as a skill set. Again, don't need to be an actuary to be able to do that, but to be able to lay a sense-making and quality measure across that. Ethical understanding, so I talked a little bit about that. How do we recognise that just because we can do something or just because there's something that's being shown up, that doesn't necessarily mean we should do it? And how do we bring a level of consciousness to our organisations, employees, and certainly leaders? We've got that mirrored in the other one as well. On the other side of things, the opportunity here, creative and critical thinking. So in many ways, the opportunity we have is only really limited by our ability to think through the things that we might want to do. So what is possible? And it really requires a level of critical and creative thinking to formulate the opportunity areas that we might want to capitalise on. Emotional intelligence, human-centred design, big thing in the past, not in the past, but in the present as well. But, it starts with how do we create things that people and organisations need? So are we building that into the way we're thinking about this work at a sort of a structure and systemic level as well as a personal level? And then sort of collaboration, communication and influence. What we're seeing, obviously in the last 10 years, we know that organisations are getting flatter and more connected, but that's in concept and aspiration perhaps, but we know the larger the organisation, the more challenging that is. And also the last couple of years with the challenges we've all faced around the level of burnout and disconnection has had people, rather than look out here, look down. And so that's a challenge for joining up people and processes across an organisation to create real value. So there's some of the organisational capabilities. On the right-hand side, I won't labour too much, but some of the leadership capabilities, some similarities and some differences. Strategic vision and understanding. Obviously, there's a need to be able to look forward and be able to think about what a vision and idea for your organisation might look like. But the last sentence of that's really important. It requires commerciality in a changing around changing business models. So, how do we monetize? How do we create a sustainable business? And have to have some understanding of what the organisational or this context might have for that. Governance and ethics, so not just your own ethical decision making, but how do we put in place governance in organisations? And we're certainly seeing that we obviously lots of conversation in the past 10 years about the ability to whether we 10 years, sorry, the last 12 months about how we regulate or not this at a sort of a governmental level and organisational level. So really important as to how the stance we take on that. Change management and talent development, obviously, really important one. How do we manage people through really rapid change? We've had this in the past, it's not a new thing, but now when we talk about disruptive and very rapid change, how are we getting ahead of that? Again, collaboration across functional integration, and then this sort of last one, risk management and resilience. So certainly when we're going about a level of experimentation, how do we do that well? But also, how do we manage risk, and how do we do this? How do we govern our work in a way that capitalises on opportunities but doesn't expose us too much as organisations either? I absolutely get a sense from listening in the room that people have got more questions than answers, and I think obviously this is a topic, and the reason I guess for these sessions is to go, okay, what do I need to start thinking about? So I'm really hoping that today has been an opportunity to open up some doors in your head, maybe not take you totally down the corridor, but to get you thinking about some of the things that are possible. The last thing I want to share with you, just as a sort of a takeaway, because it absolutely started coming up in groups that I was traversing around the room to, was sort of like where to from here, but what are the sort of things that we need to be doing? And this has come out of our research, from those who are innovators and who are ahead of the game, if you like, and are doing well. Here are the sort of 9 things that they're doing. Obviously, I'm not going to labour this at all. There's you can take away and read it. But first one there is implementing an AI-related strategic framework. So going, hey, how do we start thinking about it? What are we going to do about it? And how do we take some consideration around that? Second one is defining business cases to guide adoption. So even if it's just, there's so many opportunities, how do we just identify the ones that we think we can capitalise on and do something about and create a business case to focus our effort and energy there? Openly communicate about generative AI to reduce fear and uncertainty, but I've heard that a lot in the room going, no, we haven't communicated. No, where people are just going their own way and doing what they want to do. So we're certainly seeing that that's a really important thing for organisations, both around trust, but also around security and all that sort of stuff as well. Developing workers to effectively leverage generative AI. We've talked a lot about that today. Providing employees with rules to govern AI's use. Some organisations are going, absolutely, we want you to use it. And we want you to use publicly accessible stuff, go for it, but don't do these 3 things, for example. So how do you make sure you've got some of that in place? Encouraging employees to identify work tasks that may be accomplished or improved by generative AI. So how do you have a ground-up movement of starting to think about this sort of new idea, and in doing that, organically develop capability and awareness of this? Provide a secure environment for experimentation. Deconstructing or redefining affected job roles, really big role for sort of workforce strategy and HR really in that space. And then how do we hire for AI-specific roles in all areas of the organisation? There's a whole bunch of things in there. I know that's a lot, but certainly from our research, they're the things that we're seeing are differentiating those who are not necessarily wanting to step into the space and those who are moving fast. I guess from me, just to finish up, thank you so much for coming this morning. Really appreciate it. I know I won't see many of you before perhaps a break over the festive season, so I hope that's a restful, safe, happy and healthy one for all of you. Hopefully there are some that I will catch up with before then. For me, it's been great to connect with a few people who I'll see you soon. But from our team, thank you so much. If there's anyone you need to connect with and grab their card or connect with them, please do that. If you want to hang around for a coffee, we'll be up the back. But thank you so much for coming along. Take your little QR code. Make sure you get stuck into the content, which takes a bit deeper than today. So thank you, everyone.